Welcome back. So we have gone through the labyrinth of what is a startup, how to do it. We have talked of leadership. We have talked of it. I want to point out some things that we haven't touched on the other very elementary parts like finance, marketing, sales. That's with a specific purpose. Sometimes what happens is when you get knowledgeable about things which are easy to do because they are understandable, logical, you tend to focus on those aspects and start building your ideas or ventures based on those. Because they are easy to enumerate for yourself, they are easier to understand. But we are going to take a step back and we are going to go more on what is it that takes the right venture. Those are the secondary elements, they are execution wings. But the primary element is always about the basic foundation of why a startup needs to be done. We have taken care of the internal aspects or the emotional aspects of a startup. Today we are going to start a journey on what are the elements or what are the themes on which you can do a startup which will have a say in the way to do it. There will be a bias in this course, and we as a body who is conducting this have focused more to encourage more of you to be more impactful entrepreneurs, looking at sectors which impact. Now, to know that, you have to know the lay of the land, the themes that are important for the country, the themes that have been deliberated and debated across the different diaspora of people, and we have come to some conclusions. We are going to make you aware of those things so that you can get your basics and your foundation also stepped in those parts. Now, you always have to look at your entrepreneurship as a demand fulfillment for society. So, understanding society, understanding what are the themes that we are looking for society is important. One such overarching thing, because we do think you will have international aspirations, and then we will draw down to a little bit of a Indian context on those parts, is of course the UN part of SDG 17. Now, SDG 17 means social development goals, and there are 17 elements to it. I will step back, let you soak in the 17 points there. Don't worry, you will have enough material to go through the 17, but I just want to broadly go through some of these parts. Now, in some of these elements, you will have the ability to directly intervene with your entrepreneurial venture. In some, you probably would have to work on a more holistic fashion as a framework or through a framework and implement it. And in some, the spirit has to be embodied and you have to show that if it is impacting. So, one good thing is whenever you are doing a social enterprise or something, we will cover that later, which has an impact, it's important that you think of what are the elements here in this 17 that you are mapping on. And whenever there is a theme like this, there is also funds allocated for it. So, sometimes when you map these things, I am just telling a strategy for forward, it may be easier to resonate and draw your funding on a theme, because any charter like this also creates a financial bucketing of what is investable amount or what is deployable amount for any of these themes, because no one wants to no one wants to build the cat or not build the cat without putting in some money where they are putting their mouth in. So, I will focus on 2-3 areas which I think are extremely important for the Indian context. Everything is important, but humanity first, if I look at it as that theme, and I look at what is more impactful for the kind of divergence we are seeing in Indian economic scenario across different strata, then I would choose, of course, zero hunger as a focus, but it's difficult to achieve through an entrepreneurial mean. It needs policy, governance and entrepreneurship, but you can be a big role player in the zero hunger. We have a lot of wastage of food, we have a lot of asymmetric planning, we have a lot of supply chain problems. So, zero hunger can actually break down into multiple sectors which could be of interesting part of it. Good health and well-being, and especially now there is a surrogate mental well-being also here, which obviously is very important sector that is needed for any country and especially for us, where it's mostly a young population. Now, remember that this is not just about a health app or some. It could be a sports app, it could be an encouragement for social activities. So, when we say of good health and well-being, don't narrow down the scope to exactly good health means gym, good health means exercise. No, It could mean a variety of things. Expand your horizon and think of it that way. Quality education. You're here. Why? Because of this. Now, how do you make it mass market? How do you make it effective? How do you make it really important and effective enough for someone to have a meaningful life in terms of professional engagement? Gender equality, huge amount of patriarchal format in our society. We need to go through it. How do you enable these things? Enabling apps, like for example, you combine these themes of, let's say, well-being and good health and all those things, or look at some affordable clean energy and all. Suppose you do a saving scheme or a wealth management thing for, let's say, women only, or focus on a particular part. These kind of things are what will make your themes much more strong. Clean energy and affordable energy is a big need. So is clean water and sanitation. These are essentially practices and standards that you can create. Like industry innovation in infrastructure, what can you do about it? The government has to do everything. There's a lot of innovation, like there is an innovation that is possible in any industry as to what is the exact traceability of a particular material. Deep tech, a lot of execution, a lot of entrepreneurial energy can go into that part. Work allocation and economic growth. You have seen how the gig economy that you so like has mushroomed. That's actually a part of both decent work and economic growth, where you are matchmaking, breaking geographical boundaries, assorting work which doesn't need presence, and a new term of workers. And COVID-19 has actually gone and sort of pressed on the accelerator for that part. And we have seen all those things. These parts I have looked at it because they are good to have, but it's difficult to do that part. However, if I look at the last two, the peace, justice and strong institutions, partnerships for the goals, these are very ripe for intervention. Law and legal tech, I think, will be a very important facet in the next 5-10 years. So a lot of thought going here is very important. You know, there are indirect ways of attaining peace. This entire thing that you hear of a fake news, of that causing social disturbance, can you think of and imagine a solution which puts trust back into the news circulated, or authenticity is there in the news, or there's a punitive measure socially that we can enforce on false news spreaders. So there's a lot of innovation there, and that will indirectly affect even the peace and other parts of it. Strong institutions. What can you do about strong institutions? Put processes, make software, if you so like SaaS and stuff like that. Start with your own institutions, your schools, colleges. What's a better transparent way of showing effective education processes in institutions which are of educational nature? So there is always an opportunity found on these parts. By the way, opportunity exists everywhere. You can do a climate tech, you can actually look at life counting under, everything is important. But these are more niche, these are more mass market and more impactful given the demography you are coming in. One advice that I would like to leave you with for this session is, we often chase success, but what got someone there is not going to take you somewhere else. The reason is there is always an established order in things. So yes, there is always a space of increasing efficiency and making something better which is established. But a good entrepreneur is someone who also looks at what are the possible incoming things in the future, anticipates them, builds for them. And if you have, as a society, a bucket of 5-6 of those buses which not yet arrived, instead of chasing buses which have already left the station, you actually will have a higher probability of succeeding and hitting your goals, with at least 2 of them succeeding out of the 5-6 tries you do. That is why it's very important to have a little bit of futurescape, to understand the lay of the land, to understand the demands of demography that are coming in, and then thematize as to what your projects or your ventures would be. Now, I will leave you with a little bit of a build-up for the next session, where we need to clean the board and do other stuff. There are different ways of looking at impact of a software. And I know many of you would shake your heads in disgust or some of that, but I do think that the best software ever written was the Indian Railway Reservation System. At a time when electricity was not sacrosanct, networks didn't exist, that thing worked. And it worked and served millions and billions of people over its lifetime. But what it did was, it created a reinforcement of a belief in strong institutions by making sure the ticketing goes away from the hand of touts and direct to consumer. That very feeling that I have a right to book my own ticket, it's not an irritation factor that I have to give in to the dominance of a cartel to book tickets. It does wonders for a country's spine. It builds that faith in the system, and that's what it did. And if you look at the mushrooming of a lot of innovation in company structuring, advertising, transport, there's no other example better in the world than Amul. It changed the whole face of it. It made affordable milk available to every kid in India and took off the monopoly the MNCs had in distribution of milk. And to do that, they had to innovate very frugally. First of all, the innovation of the structure to make a cooperative, which is effective, to create a central body, to create effective mass market media. Innovation was all across, and those were the most successful entrepreneurial stories we don't talk about. I'll tell you a little story. Have you ever wondered that in a time when India didn't have electrification on the railways all through, how did milk travel for 500 kilometers, 700 kilometers for Operation Flood and not curdle? So these entire tanks that you see sometimes when you are going through a railway track of big sealed chambers, they innovated on vacuum sealed chambers which can make a much better cost for refrigeration or preservation of the milk as it transported. And these things have spun off and have gone ahead and helped build thousands of other businesses which look at that part. If I would talk in today's part, can you take that philosophy and build something very affordable and cheap, cold storage for farmers which they can put in their own fields in a small footprint? Can you make it into a container and just ship the container so there is no construction problem, there is no standardization problem? If you look at it, one of the strongest things of institution is creating standards. We lack standards. We don't know how to measure certain things on that part. Without standardization, a lot of problem happens about selectivity. If products are not standardized, you would go for where you have a quality assurance. And sometimes what may happen, and that's the case today, potato comes from, let's say, UP to West Bengal, and potato goes from West Bengal to Karnataka, and potato goes from Karnataka to Maharashtra, where they could have been locally looped. The reason is when deals are done, it's done on quality and past experience. There is no facelessness about it, and that continues. What happens? We get unnecessary logistic overviews. So though it may sound weird, all these things are connected. Everything is connected to each other. It's how you look at it. Now when you look at these 17 axes and so, and judge your project on that, remember the validation we talked about? It becomes a very enhanced impact validation of the project you are doing. We will set up this premise and we'll come back with more on that part. This is going to be a long session because this is, you may say, the highlighted, focused or sponsored theme from us. That doesn't mean that you cannot go anything outside this theme. You can do a deep tech thing which is completely B2B. Absolutely anything is open. But this is where we feel India needs the innovation entrepreneurship most. So we, as an institution of education and for the betterment of the country, will focus on this with a little bit of an undue bias. Thank you so much. We'll carry on in the next session. Welcome back as we go into a more deeper dive of the several aspects of impact investments or impact ventures that we talked about. I want to first start off with differentiating between the three main categories of impact. The first, of course, is social enterprises. The second is sustainable enterprises. Now remember, something could be a sustainable social enterprise also. This is the basic factor. These are attributes. Whereas green ventures or green enterprises are more to do with a little part of the sustainable part of it, more looking at the planet, but it is essentially more about slightly higher order of tech. This could be about social technologies, social innovations and all. This is mostly about a little bit, may have social practices like if you're looking at afforestation and all. There will be a deep tech layer in it necessarily. The other two, however, may not have a deep tech layer, may have a huge impact. Innovation is constant throughout all the spectrum, but the amount of technology, amount of raw tech, core tech that you need, that will vary. The other deviation is that social enterprises may not have a profitability aspect to it. That means they are not essentially looking out for profit. Whereas sustainable enterprises, they focus on balancing the bottom line, the profit, planet and people, all the three aspects together. Green is basically just to make sure it's more focused. Obviously, it has to be profitable, by the way. It is not a social venture. It is profitable and it is all about making the world greener, our lives better, etc. It's focused on mostly the tactile part, if you can say so. Whereas these could be on the social as well as the tactile part both. Examples of social issues or social enterprises are variant. You have a lot of education foundations, edtech so to say, but they are focusing on mass market. They run a lot on CSR money, they deploy that money properly and they have a ROI which is more aligned to society than to stakeholder. In a sense, they take the whole country as a stakeholder and try to maximize the benefit for the whole demography they are in focus. When I say country, I mean the domicile or the area they are working on. There could be a social enterprise focused only on, let's say, the rural, original population of Bengal like Santals and all, and focus only on their education, poverty upliftment or health upliftment. These are examples. Sustainable will have that facet of profit, planet and people together. So it has to be a profitable venture. It may not be looking at supernormal profit or niche profit, but it is self-sustaining and that's why it's sustainable. But at the same time, not at the cost of making the planet suffer. So if you are setting up a kind of a pollutant, let's say a soap making factory, that will not be a sustainable venture. But if you make a soap which is made from organic products with some technology and some practices which doesn't pollute or they are organically decomposable, that will become a sustainable venture. So every venture or every enterprise that you have has a sustainable component. I can talk about let's say a very strange example of a data center which can be a sustainable enterprise, where it is power sufficient, it is power net neutral, it's carbon neutral, it's using and uses a lot of water, but it charges water up. So it's made an ecosystem which is sustainable. That would become a sustainable enterprise. So one key aspect would be, it's very difficult to change norms of society. A huge focus going to a sustainable ventures or transformation of aspects which are polluting or which are there, which may be profitable, but they are doing some damage to the earth or doing damage to people, anything of that nature, the transformation of that to a sustainable model is a huge scope for entrepreneurship. Green, you're all in the EV cycle, maybe many of you may have electronics, bikes and scooters or looking at cars and all. But you know, some of these things are not always very environmentally positive. Looking at better sustainable, like for example, I can give an example that our power transmission and power production in India is actually very polluting and there's a huge amount of wastage. So when you buy an EV, you feel good about it, but when you are charging an EV, maybe it's polluting something more which was not there before. Maybe it's still less polluting, the debate is still going on, what is more polluting and all. But a simple shortcut would be, can you make a solar powered or wind powered garage where when you store the car inside that garage and charge from it, it's a fully sustainable cycle. Now you're using a lot of these things. Remember the combined part that we had talked of, in the scamper that we had talked of in the model. So this is a perfect example of a lot of combination, not just deep tech, but a lot of combination can happen. The innovation in green tech, a lot of focus has to be on the basic elements of life, roti, kapra, makan. So when you look at food tech, agri tech, a huge amount of innovation is possible in this sector, which will always be sustainable and they'll have a social impact. So you can have a social, green, sustainable project also. All permutations, combinations are possible. But understanding what you are doing will help you to make your financial models and make the flow of money and all. When we cover financial model in the next semester or so, it will be there. What I want is you go ahead and dream without the constraint of thinking of those things, and then when you have done your hypothesis and you have gone ahead, it will be easier for you to see which part of financial assessment, which part of financial modeling would actually be beneficial for your overall goal and model for this sort of businesses. As an element, it doesn't change. The things that we talked of validation, identification, all those things remain constant. But what you want to do as a motive, as your own how do you say, your own returns for yourself is very important. Here the heart and the soul of the entrepreneur matters a lot. If you are someone who's moved and gets maximum happiness from making people smile, making people go ahead, or contributing for a future for the next generation, etc., these are great sectors to go in. And again, if you are a patriot, if you are someone who's looking at the world as a whole, then this entire spectrum is an extreme example of doing real good impact, which has a huge aspect of overall development of the country or domicile. Now, when I talk about it, there's also the scope that, India is somewhere in the middle, but there are nations which are growing at a higher pace, which is like what India was, let's say 5-10 years back. Now, always India has leapfrogged, because when you start, you don't need to evolve. You can learn from the evolution of others and leapfrog. Like check the cell towers of India. We already went at a higher level than most European and North American countries, simply because we were a late entrant. We didn't have any baggage to do. So when the countries like Africa or Indonesia, which are again going to be the future growth engines of the world, need to take some technology and just leapfrog and come to a normal state, where do you think is the most likely place they would look for? Our climate, our people, our demographics, our economic expansion, all these things, and also the political system, that also matters. These will impact as to where the choice of technology would come. And literally, these are areas for sure where it will be, in my mind, a transformation of being innovated in India, established in India, but then carried to the world. I don't know how many of you read the news. Even modern countries often come back to the model. Amul's cooperative model is now being adopted all across the milk farmers in US, and they are actually finding it better for social upliftment and for impact, because profit was always there, but the profit was going to the hands of the corporates. By incorporating the Amul model with the milk farmers are getting a larger traction of the profits. That also is a very important aspect. Even if it's a zero-sum game, you can still have a social project just because it's distributing the profit at the more likely places and bringing in the SDG goals of equality and all. Now let's put the whole picture on. Suppose it's a restricted market. The total demand is less. The average margin a big corporate is making is 40%. So you, let's say, are paying 100 rupees to buy a good, and the farmer is actually ending up getting 25 to 30 rupees, because the company in between is adding some value needlessly, but it's also keeping a huge amount of profit, 40%. Now that 40% profit for the thousands and thousands of units they are selling is going to a minuscule amount of population, which is the stakeholder, shareholder, etc. Imagine that this company did not exist and a cooperative existed, which could do this cost of transportation and all. Then you would be probably able to buy a shirt for 80 rupees. The farmer, instead of 25, would get 40 rupees, and still there is enough left of 35 rupees to be split for the value additions and all those things. Where does it fail? It fails because of brand and establishment. That is where standardization comes in. Amul works because Amul has standardized. You know that 100 gram of packet of Amul, no matter which factory it is done, where you are buying it from, will have a standardized taste, will have a standardized quality. It has been able to create a brand and all. So when we go into marketing and sales, you will understand the importance of it. But it has been able to create a brand, which is a later aspect, that's more of a knowledge of people. But what it created first is a process which standardizes it across different spectrum without allowing local variations to come. Now, when you look at this aspect, this will be one of the last lectures in terms of what you are going to do, and this is enough of a fodder that we are giving you to go to your research and theme building, which is the objective in the first phase. We will have just one more session after this, which will give you a peep into the future as to what are the things we will cover onto that part. But for now, the plan is the following, that these courses are more or less going to give you an umbrella idea of what are the things to look at. You will not know more from these lectures. These lectures are just an entry point. Your questions will be the real learning. So ask a lot of questions. Every time you see any of the lessons and all, write to us with your questions. We'll have Q&A sessions which will be live. Some of you who ask the best questions will be taken in and we'll discuss it. Next is we'll set up a leadership application where we'll have the heads of the ventures come in. They will select their teams. After the teams are selected, you will go through your research and other methodologies and then choose your themes and submit. This part we want to complete by the end of this calendar year, not academic year, calendar year, which is more or less in line with your first semester. So by end of this year, we need to have a lot of ideas buzzing and all. You will be more or less covered by the courses we have taken till now for this part, and on that part the Q&A is there. Now I want to stress on the Q&A. You all are used to studying just before the night of the exam. Entrepreneurship is not that. Entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint. So the more you involve yourself, the more you are into the thing all through, and the uniformity of ups and downs, that is what you will be given marks on. Your perseverance, your tenacity, your process orientation, load distribution. These are the things you will be given grades on, not on some question answer session. In this course, like I had said at the beginning, the key marks and grades would come through the work you do. So your company or venture will earn the marks, and that marks will be distributed depending on the mental equity that you have done, which you will negotiate and come. Mostly it will be equal, but over time it will be different depending on the contribution. So remember, this will be a long haul, and any aspect of depth will not be missed out, because you can do some sort of a hoodwinking if it's a short period or just an exam. But over a 2-year period or 1.5-year period, it's very difficult to sustain anything other than real work. So you will be judged on your real work, and it will balance out. The entire ecosystem will be exactly like, almost like a professional market there. You will change companies, you will merge companies, you will shut down companies, you will aggregate companies, you will form new companies. We will take it through that part. Any work that you are doing will essentially almost like a weekly salary or a monthly salary that you will be accumulating. I hope you have fun when doing this course. It's very a contrarian way of doing it, but in my belief, it's the only way you can learn entrepreneurship, just by doing it. Thank you so much. This is a wrap-up call or a wrap-up recording. Basically, I want to just tell you what lies in the future. First of all, let me tell you that these parts were like foundation, the very basis of why you form your companies and all. After this, a lot of detailing will emerge, a lot of things will there. After you've done your theme, the first logical conclusion is, let's say, setting up the company. And that has elements of law, elements of finance, all of it rolled together. But unlike other courses, we don't have a fixed structure after this. We will make it on a need base. We'll perceive what is needed at that point of time by the most of you, and then train to make sure that those gaps are fulfilled the earliest. So if tomorrow after we look at this part, we feel that most of you lack financial knowledge, we'll focus on the financial part first. If you feel that the legal knowledge needs to be upgraded more because you lack more in legal knowledge than in this knowledge of finance, we will go to the legal first. But all the topics that we'll cover will encompass various aspects. There is legal, there is ethics, company formation by itself is quite a big thing, the finance of projection, business plans, risk mitigation, insurance, recruitment, HR, you name it, it's going to be a cacophony of things. And many of these things will essentially be lectures that we keep on recording on a need basis, short capsules suitable for your time part, directions to resources that you can look at and then do. But one thing that we want to look at and do on a focused manner in the future is look at the themes that are emerging, the sectors that you are covering, and do refreshers and pointers and quite a little bit of critical analysis on the various sectors that you're focusing on. That will really help you. And it will also show you how these things that we talked in theory are actually put to practice. How do you do research? What is research of the primary, secondary type that we talked about? And one of them would be taking a sector, and we will do a case study for that part. Apart from that, of course, we'll meet very interesting entrepreneurs, subject matter experts, academics. We will line that up. But the demand has to come from you. So the questions you raise will actually form the basis on which you are doing. And the reward mechanism is for your inquisitiveness, curiousness, perseverance, and all these soft qualities. Knowledge is a byproduct of all these things. As an entrepreneur, getting these foundation skills formed and getting your intuition working is our prime focus, and that's what we'll focus on. If I look at the journey, and I'll get more detail, I just gave a glimpse of it there. I do entreat most of you to see and apply for the leadership positions. You'll get a right to choose your team, and you'll get some extra credits for it also. So every team that will be formed like a company, where a little bit of the shares, so to say, or the percentage will be held by us to be distributed to you on performance to better. You will be dispensed with the equity in that particular entity onto that part. So for example, let's say each of you own 8%, the leader owns, let's say, 10%. These are just example numbers, and 40% is held by, let's say, the organization. Then the maximum amount of marks that are given to you is a number of heads into 100, let's say. That's the cash that we want to distribute after your ranking. So let's say the maximum marks that can be given is 1000, and you earn 800. 40% of that, which is 320, goes away straight for future. The remaining 480 is what will be distributed in the ratio. So 8% of 480 is what you will end up getting. At the end of the term, on success of the project, all these things that are in cash on in the 30% will come back on the success. So success matters, but throughout this entire payment of marks, your rigorousness, your regularity, the way you are doing it sequentially, the way you are taking seriousness of it will come. Some of you may not perform, your shares will go down. Some of you may outperform, your shares will go up. That's what the 30% is for, to give a pool to not only say that this is what we are withholding, but also to give you the marks that are accumulated and the extra part that you see depending on your contribution. So contribute, work as a team, don't be a pillion rider, don't hope that of the 8 people, 2 people will do the project, what will they do? This is not going to be marked like that. Your participation is a key to your marks. Your marks and your teammates' marks will vary, though the team is the only entity that will be given the mark. If that's a puzzle, figure it out. If you have questions, ask us. That's all for the wrap now. Lots of things to come. I hope to see you excited and I hope to see a lot of questions. Thank you so much.